ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Danny Quintana. He's the president of the Global High Seas Marine Preserve, and he's going to talk to us on the topic of Copernicus was a mistake and why we must explore the heavens to save life on Earth. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you. Now, all of you today, before you came here, whether you walked here or whether you flew or you drove, you didn't take into account all of the life forms that exist everywhere around you. You're just walking. You are oblivious to the trees, the grass by the trees, squirrels crawling up them, people walking their dogs. And we take it for granted that there's all of this life here on this wonderful planet. My talk today is about how we need to have a paradigm shift in our view of the planet. We started off with Bartholomew about 2,000 or so years ago, and Bartholomew was a great scholar, but he didn't have a telescope. So the view of the world at the time of Bartholomew was that the Earth is the center of the universe, and the planets and the stars and the sun circle around the Earth. And at the time of Bartholomew, it was a much, much larger world. You would go on horseback to get from Rome to London, or you would go on a sailing ship to get from the Mediterranean to North Africa, but it was a much, much smaller world, and there were far fewer people. We estimate there were probably 300 million people at that time. So you fast forward to the fall of the Roman Empire, and eventually you get to Copernicus, and Copernicus was an extraordinarily brilliant man. And his math was right, and yes, certainly the Earth was not the center of that universe. It was a planet that circled a star, and that star was part of a much larger galaxy. And then you go from there to one of my favorite characters in history, Mr. Gordiano Bruno. The Spanish Inquisition burned him at the stake because he was an advocate of Copernicus, and after Copernicus died, he said, well, the Earth isn't the center of the universe. I challenge the divinity of Jesus, and I challenge that the Virgin Mary was a virgin, and he did some really, really stupid things. So the Roman Inquisition, not the Spanish Inquisition, the Roman Inquisition burned him at the stake. So Galileo was a little bit smarter than that. It's like, I recant the teachings of Copernicus, and no, the church is right.
Can somebody turn off those fish?
Yeah.
I want you to see this. The reason I have this video is I want you guys to appreciate the life that is here on Earth, okay. That we need to realize that it's a small planet, and Monterey Bay is our conservation partner. And what we're doing is half of the wildlife in the oceans is gone, 90% of the large predator fish have been killed off, and we're killing 200,000 sharks each day for shark fin soup so that middle class and upper class Chinese families can show they have status. And I will get to that in just a minute, but so you go from Copernicus, Bruno's burned at the stake, Galileo has a nice telescope, and then you get to Kepler and then Newton and Einstein, and now we have a world where we are one planet with life in this solar system, and this is one star at the arm of a large galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and we learned from Hubble that there are billions of galaxies. Well, so the importance of life on Earth seems to be rather irrelevant using Drake's equation, that there is the probability that there's life on other star systems. Well, that and $5 will buy you a cup of coffee. Okay, there's life in other star systems, but our technology is so antiquated and so minute that we can barely get to the moon. Last time we were there was 47 years ago, and we've only had 12 people visit, all Americans, all white males. Sorry, girls, no, females are not allowed on the moon at that time. With getting this idea that we're going to get to Mars, which is a 6-month journey on a good day when the planets align properly, we really, really have to rethink this idea. My paper last year was on the case against the human exploration of Mars until we improve robotics and propulsion systems. And we do need to improve robotics and propulsion systems, and we do need to explore the inner solar system. And we need to look at the world in a completely different way. When every one of you leave this room today and are outside, I want you to look up at the ceiling. You know, the top of the troposphere, you know, you're looking at 12 miles up, and by the time you get to 30 miles, you're in space, and by the time you get to 230 miles, which is where the space station is, you're in deep space. So we can't get to Mars with the antiquated, incredibly slow vehicles we have now, much less explore it and terraform it with humans. And the nearest star, you know, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light years away. Now, a light year is over 5 trillion miles. The probes we have managed to send out of our solar system will take 40,000 years to get to the next star system. We haven't even had human civilization that long. I mean, we have to look at where we are right now. Up until 100 years ago, we really didn't have indoor plumbing, and we didn't really get electrification of our cities until realistically the 1930s. I mean, automobiles haven't really changed. We're still using fossil fuels since the Ford Motor Company did mass production. And at least 4 billion people on this planet don't have access to the internet. So we need to think of the Earth as this is the center of the universe. And Copernicus was mistaken. I'm not going to say he was wrong, because he wasn't wrong. But, you know, Copernicus and Newton and Kepler and the math and the science that they produced certainly changed our paradigm of reality. But we need to bring reality right back down to Earth, because if you look at every planet in our solar system, there's clearly no life or even the possibility of complex life on Mercury. Venus needs to be fully explored because it's a runaway greenhouse effect. And as all of you know, it's debatable and highly questionable that climate change is a Chinese conspiracy. I just don't buy that theory. I think we need to look at these greenhouse gases, because what these greenhouse gases do is it causes acidification of the oceans. And if you have more acidification of the oceans, you're going to kill the coral reefs and you're going to destroy the wildlife. The whole purpose of the Global High Seas Marine Preserve, which I would ask all of you to spread this message, is to educate the public on what is happening to the wildlife in the oceans. I mean, look at the problems facing this planet. You got this jackass in Brazil that thinks it's okay to burn the lungs of the planet, and the international community is not in uproar. Instead, the media is writing stories about Kim Kardashian's fat ass and who she's entertaining at that particular moment. No, the burning of the jungles, the rainforests in Indonesia for palm oil or in Brazil is important, and the public needs to know. The acidification of the oceans, overfishing is important, and the public needs to know. So we have to study these planets, because whatever happened out there, we're looking at the future. If you look at Mars and the ozone layer disappears, well, we could do that with CFCs here. And you lose your atmosphere, you lose your water, and you lose your planet. The asteroid belt might have been a planet. We don't know. We don't know whether it exploded or whether the gravity from Jupiter kept it from ever forming as a planet. But all of you in this room understand how nuclear weapons work, and you know there's no upper limit to a hydrogen bomb. We live on a planet where these tribes still have access to nuclear weapons. And I hate to call them nuclear weapons, because they're really not. What they are is they're instruments for committing genocide. You can't possibly know 1 million people or even 100,000 people, but we're no longer throwing rocks at each other and sharp sticks. Now we have the ability to use fission and fusion weapons and really, really cause havoc. So we do have to study this inner solar system, and we have to carefully study, we have to explore it, and we have to create brand new industries for, in a capitalist system, you have to continually reinvent yourself. So by exploring outer space and providing the legal framework for it, as Ivan talked about in his talk, and providing the moral framework for it, as Kit talked about here earlier, then we might just survive. Because what we're looking at is the destruction of most life forms on this planet. So the Copernicus view that the Earth is not the center of the universe is mistaken. The paradigm shift we have to have is the Earth is the center of our universe. If you can't get to the other star systems, for the most part, they're irrelevant. And we better hope that the civilizations from those star systems can't get to Earth, because from your studies of history, all of you know what my Spanish ancestors did to the New World. Now, I can't say that we invented racism, but we were pretty good at it. And unfortunately, between that and the Spanish Inquisition and the other things that burning the books of the Incas and the Aztecs and the Mayans, we really made a mess of things. We no longer live in a planet where we can make a mess of things. We live in a planet where 10 nations are dumping huge amounts of garbage into the oceans. We live in a planet where we're dumping over 44 billion tons of CO2, and what that's doing is warming the planet. So we have to study what happened to Venus so we can better understand how to deal with our greenhouse gases here. Now, studying the solar system will also do something else for the public. Then young people will realize we are 10 hours away from Rome, from me visiting my friends over in Italy. We are 10 hours away from Paris. We are 18 hours away from Melbourne, Australia. We live on a planet where you can reach virtually every city within 22 hours. But despite the technological achievements that we've made, we do not live in a world where we can go and have space tourism. And why? What happened to the space program that set it back so far? Well, the Nixon administration, our national wart, pretty well killed it. The program in the 1960s to use nuclear power for space exploration was abandoned, the NERV program, as some of you are aware. So consequently, we're stuck with the same propulsion systems that basically started when the Nazis were using V-2 rockets to bomb London. We have to change all of that. And we can do all of that with space exploration. Because the one thing about space exploration is it creates incredible innovation. Our heart monitors, contact lenses, ceramics, computers, all of that is as a result of the space program. And the more we spend on space exploration, the more benefits will come here. We can mine the asteroid belts, and we do have to protect the property rights of companies that decide to invest in space exploration. And we do have to do it, but we have to do it as a concerted human endeavor. We no longer have the resources for the United States to go and explore Mars by ourselves. We squandered those resources in a failed war in the Middle East called Iraq that was a complete violation of international law. And in a prior life, I've helped deliver wheelchairs all over the world. Iraqis need 4 million wheelchairs. When I was in Afghanistan, you'd see people crawling on the ground with their legs blown off, and 26% of that population is disabled. What we are doing with our present model is not only not working, it is extremely dangerous. You're going to get a lot of propaganda before this administration attacks Iran. And is there a legal reason to attack Iran? No. But is there pressure to attack Iran? Yeah, there is a lot of pressure to create a war there. Now, if we go with a different model, if we go with a model where space exploration is the primary driver of the economy instead of the military-industrial complex, we might just survive. the Copernicus model, where we are not that important, we're not that significant, couldn't be more morally mistaken. Copernicus was brilliant, as were all of these other scholars. But the basic reality of life is, if you go to Saturn, it's going to take you at least 6 years to get there. Neptune, 9 years, Uranus, and then you go to the Kuiper Belt. We can't even send probes with humans to the Kuiper Belt. We don't have those propulsion systems. We do need to develop them. And the way to develop them is to redirect defense spending from the military-industrial complex towards space and ocean exploration, and use the same defense contractors, because these guys have Congress wired right down to the last vote. So since they're going to get the money anyway, let's give them a new mission, and that new mission will be to explore the solar system in conjunction with other nations. This is the one battle with the oceans. This is the one environmental battle that we can actually win. This is the one area where we can succeed. What we can do is amend the Law of the Seas Treaty and make all of the oceans a giant marine park for all of mankind. That's why we put together the Global High Seas Marine Preserve. Okay, we can do that if we think this is the center of the universe. The oceans belong to all of mankind and to all future generations. That takes amending the law. But in order to have law, you have to have people respect the law. And there is no respect for the law, not only from this administration, but prior administrations. If you don't want more refugees coming to the United States from Central America, then quit creating the conditions for these refugees. Quit overthrowing those governments and installing military dictatorships. We have over 5,000 military bases and or installations in over 90 countries. Now, we're doing that by running up a budget deficit of over $1 trillion a year, so you create the illusion of prosperity. The country is not more prosperous now than it was in prior times. Basically, what you have is inflation. I mean, are these homes really worth these prices? No, they're not. And the home prices are not commensurate with wages. But until we start thinking of the world, as one, this is the center of the universe, until we change our paradigm and go to that model, we probably are not going to survive. Every one of you in this room is aware that most species go extinct. And if we think we won't go extinct, then I guess our study of science and history is probably not where it should be. Ending life on Earth is not going to be the end of the Earth. It will just mean the end of human civilization, such as it is. I mean, a Western reporter asked Mahatma Gandhi what he thought of Western civilization, and he said, "I think it would be a really good idea." So, in order to change from the Copernicus model to a different model, not necessarily Ptolemy, but just a different model, where we view this as one planet, as one species, and that other species are also important, until we incorporate the teachings of the Native American community, which I worked with for many years, where plants and animals are persons, they're just not people. So what I'd ask all of you to do is, as you go outside, look up at the ceiling, and explain to your family members and your friends that, look, there are ideas out there that will work. We can create a global high seas marine preserve to preserve life in the oceans and save the oceans from collapse. And we don't have to like each other, but we have to work together. And we can do that if all of us respect the law. Thank you.